what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and welcome back to the Zombie Train stories. This week we're gonna be talking a little bit about the battleships and the general Navy fleet. I know last time I covered a little bit about the meeting on the seas and the Britons and stuff like that, but I'm gonna wrap it back around here and talk just specifically about what came into our use. But first, very briefly, today we do a lot of work down here past the dam. Pretty much everything is done past the dam except for a little bit of work up towards the Old Main. Or up on the Old Main. We actually make it to the summit. The summit of the Old Main happens to be about, about 600 meters above sea level. So, there's that. We can assume that the route here is not exactly prototypical and indicative of the size of the real railroad, because if I wanted to do that, I probably would have used a dem. Of course, when we started this endeavor, dems really weren't a thing for us that we knew about. Now they are. But anyways. So, let me real quick go over to the video and talk about who asked me this. I know I should have just dropped this in, but this is just what's occurring to me now. Oh, somebody left me another comment. I will have to look at that later. So, that's the mission, blah blah blah, zombie train port. Alright. No, that's Portland. Why is this here? No. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys, I'm burning time. So, somebody asked about, okay, what's going on with, these steam-powered battleships, and, I think there's a slight misconception here that I'm gonna need to correct. That is, all of our battleships, at least I'm fairly certain, U.S. battleships, all of our battleships have been steam. Oh my god, the first article, is it time to bring back the battleships? No. For what purpose? So, even the last ships, the Montana class, they were the last battleship class authorized. There were 5 planned, 5 canceled. These still ran on 8 Babcock and Wilcox 2-drum express-type boilers powering 4 sets of Westinghouse-geared steam turbines. So, my point is, no battleship that we've had in the Navy, or maybe, perhaps no battleship ever, has been small enough to warrant using internal combustion engines on. Or, internal combustion engines had not grown sufficiently to the point, and perhaps have not grown, in order to be used to power things like this. To something that large. The thing is, it was originally called the Islander Fleet, and it kind of maintained that name even throughout the Zombie Train, because we had the Zombie Train Incorporated, and then the Zombie Train Incorporated Navy was a little bit much, so it became the Islander Fleet, and remained the Islander Fleet for pretty much until it was supplanted by the U.S. Navy, when we kind of got reabsorbed. But this consisted of course, firstly, the Block Island ferries. That was some of the first things. Then, of course, the Constitution. Then the John W. Brown and the Jeremiah O'Brien, the 2 Liberty ships. Then the USS Olympia, which was sort of our big guns. For a long while, the USS Olympia was the biggest and heaviest thing we had. We had the opportunity to get our hands on a destroyer, although this was a more modern one. Although we had a few chances to get our hands on a destroyer, but again, we pretty much stayed away from anything that used oil that we couldn't convert easily until we got our hands on the refinery equipment after the meeting on the seas, after Unfriendly Seas, which is that book. That'll be done eventually. We never reactivated any of the fast battleships and anything anything particularly new, anything new enough to really warrant it. We had, if it could run on coal, it was pretty much already ours, and we could work on it no problem. If it was converted from coal to oil burning at some point, that meant we could convert it back. And that wasn't necessarily difficult. Now, what is this? Okay, no, these are too old. Or, sorry, these are too new. Yeah, we had, of course, we spent a very long time staring at the USS Massachusetts, which is up here in Fall River, at Battleship Cove. But, of course, that was something that we, that was something that we sort of looked at and went, well, that's, A, what do we need this for? Other than to just look imposing. And B, it'd be a massive undertaking. We don't have the fuel. We don't really have the resources. It's okay. Well, what can we do? What won't be as massive of an undertaking? What'll be, a little bit more friendly to our hopes to have a battleship? Because we did want one. We did need something really big to make any sort of naval engagement that we ran into one-sided. And, of course, this was a little bit evident after the original meeting with the Trincomalee, because that kind of scared the dickens out of us, and we remembered that for a long, long time. But it also made sense more after the Islander War, and after... There were a couple of events, I can't put names to them right now, but there were a couple of events where people managed to get their hands on enough fuel to sort of screw us around with a destroyer or two. One of these was, I think, the Barry, which was in Washington, D.C. for a while. We had a pact with the Seafarers, which were an organization around Washington, D.C., and then that went south and went sour shortly after we became the Zombie Train Incorporated. And they turned away from us, and then they attacked us. And I don't know what was going on with their internal politics, but they made a hell of a dent. And, that was at the very beginning of the Zombie Train Incorporated that they managed to do that. And frankly, the only reason we managed to win is because there was nothing really, really, troubling in their way. We managed to get the drop on them afterwards. And troubling for us, I mean. And they were heavily undermanned. They did not have the crew to man a destroyer. Not everyone wanted to go along with their plan, and thus they ran into trouble. So, anyways, the one battleship we did end up having was the Texas. And the reason for having the Texas was because it's the only battleship remaining that was once fired by coal. And of course, the 14 coal-fired boilers with oil spray were replaced with oil-fired boilers. But at this point it was, it had the room, and it had, the original diagrams and stuff. We weren't flying blind. We knew what it looked like when it had coal and coal-fired boilers running the thing, and we could just return it to that state instead of, outfitting, say, the USS Massachusetts, where we would be building blind, pretty much. We would have to guess. And, despite the fact that we could, figure out how much steam was needed for the turbines and compensate for that and blah, blah, blah. The ships weren't designed to have coal bunkers and to have coal firing and stuff like that. So, that was not something we were interested in doing. So we ended up with the Texas. And the Texas was sort of a lumbering... It was sort of the thing that everyone pointed to and went, wow, you dumped a lot of resources into this and it does nothing. And they were pretty much absolutely right. There were very few times where we felt the slightest bit vindicated by having Texas, and those times could probably have been solved if we had a destroyer or two. Which, may have been incredibly, an incredibly smaller amount of work. So, that was our fleet. And of course, we did have another ones. We had the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Eagle at our disposal, and that was, that was naturally, not armed, so it wasn't an immense amount of help. But it did help on the reconnaissance front. And we had a few more armed vessels and a few unarmed vessels, and, pretty much anything with sail power that had a cargo hold that we could get our hands on was great, because it means we didn't need to dump fuel into it. We could sacrifice time. We had time aplenty. There was nothing crushing down on us. The Navy never even set us any deadlines. All of our deadlines were self-imposed. So we didn't have to worry about any of that, and this is going to get there when it gets there, and then we will continue work. And in the meantime, we could always find something to work on, because there was, with the massive loss of population, there was a massive loss of, first of all, workers, but second of all, there was a loss of maintained buildings, and that meant a lot of people went into maintenance of various things. A subset of people went into construction, as I've said. We did take a few classes of things here or there and started rebuilding them, or, a few cities here and there, and started, reworking them. One of the first things was, okay, well, how are we're going to fortify this place? And that was always an interesting question, because, especially, the closer you got to the Midwest, the more zombies you had to deal with. And same with New York until after, the second round of trying to get rid of stuff out of New York, which once the military knew what the hell they were doing, that, I won't say it went smoothly, but it went. But that was well down along the line. So, especially out west, the zombies never stopped. We had a particular problem with, of course, a lot of the easiest structures to build are brick. And okay, well, where do you get brick? And that's, that was always a problem, and a lot of the clay does come from the Midwest. So, getting trains out there, getting miners out there, getting settlements out there, that was a problem. Because those wide open spaces, they create herds of zombies. And they just sort of clump up. And then you run into not a pack of, a 10 or 100 or 1,000, but 100,000. Or several 100,000 or several million. And that immediately creates a massive problem, and even though this means that there aren't zombies elsewhere, you can't just kite them around forever. But yeah, so that was that with our Navy. We didn't get in shooting wars too often. It wasn't something that happened because people weren't in the business of creating shooting wars. It was pretty much in everyone's best interests. In everyone's best interests to work together most of the time. And there were a few occasions where this wasn't the case, and a few occasions where people saw it differently. And of course, this created plenty of problems. But those cases were few and far between. They weren't something that happened all the time, because if they happened all the time, or rather, they weren't something that happened all the time, because the kind of people that would make a fuss about that probably already got turned into zombies, or got killed by somebody else. That's just how it happened. If you were a troublemaker, if you didn't work to keep yourself alive, and, it wasn't easy going, especially if you were by yourself, it was pretty much impossible. There are a few people that survived scavenging, but once you run out of things to scavenge, you're SOL. There's no doubt about it. One person, unless you're pretty damn smart and pretty damn resourceful, has an awful hard time just making enough food for themselves, as well as defending themselves, as well as, everything else that comes with living on your own. And, it only takes for one thing to go wrong before that person is dead. Anyways, that sounded kind of morbid, but that's just what the truth was. You had to band together, you had to work together, and that's why, even a fruitless project, virtually fruitless, like getting Texas moving, it created an era of working together. And of course that was less important because we were sort of a government-sponsored organization at that point. But this was hey, we're going to do this thing. We're going to help each other to do this thing. And the more you could stir up, and naturally, there were no funds exchanged during this entire thing. It was sort of like a weird breed of pseudo-communism socialism, but my point is it got people worked up and it got things flowing, which was sort of our whole reason for being to begin with. Anyways, Train Man out.